Hey guys, it's Roderick, and I am here with a review of White Lotus, Season 2, Episode 1. I totally forgot this show was coming back, and when I saw it yesterday, that was up on HBO Max, I was like, I got to A, watch this, and B, review this, because this is one of my favorite shows from last season. It's really like a murder mystery that's wrapped up in a great drama with really interesting characters. So I was really excited. Plus, with Handmaid's Tale about to be over in the next couple of episodes, this is another way for me to keep on coming back to you all with some great television reviews and recaps. So if you're new to my channel, one of the things I do is I am an actor, screenwriter, and filmmaker. So I always like to drop in some little pearls about the construction of really television making and television shows and screenwriting that kind of adds an extra little layer or lacquer to the shows we're watching. So sit back if you're new, if you've been here, if you've watched my Handmaid's Tales, then you pretty much know what you're gonna get. It's gonna be the real as fuck review about some of our favorite shows. So anyway, we start off with, again, the murder. So if you remember from like season 1, it always starts off with the murder that happens and then we go back in time. So this time we start off with, we have the wife, which they didn't mention her name at all during the show, and I didn't look it up, but eventually we'll just call her Mrs. Sullivan, because you know her name is Mrs. Sullivan. So we see Mrs. Sullivan at the beach with this fabulous bathing suit on, by the way. I really like that, her bathing suit. And, you know, she's chit-chatting, and she sees these two women, and they say they just flew in today, and it says that she and Mrs. Sullivan says she's about to leave. She says at a great time. So when she says we're about to leave, you're like, well, okay, we know it's a husband. So Mrs. Sullivan gets in the water for a final dip, and then we discover the dead body, right? So now we know there's at least one dead body. We see it. So we're like, well, okay, having watched the show, we're like, well, who's the dead body? What's going to happen? Always like to set up. We get at least very innocuous, always one dead body that we know by the end of the series. By the end of the season, it's gonna fill in all the blanks. We're gonna know who the dead body is. So we're like, okay. So Mrs. Sullivan is screaming. She finds the dead body, and then we get Valentina Manager Fish, who is already becoming one of my favorite characters because I just love the way she moves and keeps everybody in formation at all times. And then we get her lazy assistant manager, Rocco, and Valentino's like, what's going on? He's like, oh, they found a dead body at the beach. Valentino, because, you know, she's just giving you corporate fish, is like, well, that's okay. The fish, you know, the beach isn't part of the property. But then he's like, we found a couple of dead bodies. And she's like, well, how many dead bodies did we find? We don't know yet, right? So then they get the flashback to 1 week earlier. So then we get to the arrival. So the arrivals always kind of sets up who our characters are. We get our first look. So then we get Theo James, who is in the Divergent series. He's playing Cameron Sullivan, and then his wife, who we remember from the previous scene. So we know that Cameron is Mrs. Sullivan's husband, but we don't know whether or not Cameron has made it to the end of the season yet, okay? But we remember the wife, we get Cameron. Then we get Aubrey Plaza, whose name is Harper in the show. Harper and her husband, Ethan, those are the Spillers, okay? So then they're together, and then we see in the boat, they're all kind of friendly, and then, you know, Theo's kind of winking, and I was like, is he trying to fuck like Aubrey Plaza? Is he, you know, it's something going on there, right? Then we get Michael Imperioli, if you don't remember him from The Sopranos. And then we get Nono, which is the grandfather, and then the younger son, which is Albie, okay? So we got now we get our our three groups. Then, Lord, here comes Tanya. So if you remember Tanya from season 1, Tanya was the hot mess who put our girl Belinda all the way through it, promising her loads of money to get her wellness clinic together, whatever, only to back out of Belinda. So Tanya is already starting this season with me because I just did not like the way she put our girl Belinda through it last season. Belinda was only good, just working hard every day, and you know, big wheels keep on turning. And here comes Tanya with her pipe dreams and her bags of money, promising Belinda something that Tanya was never going to do. But we do feel bad for Tanya because, you know, we see the vulnerability. Tanya meets her husband at the previous season, White Lotus. She's just lonely. She was there she was there to bury her mother. So she's grieving this loss. She meets this fantastic new man. And, you know, we're like, okay, Tanya. So at this point, I'm like, okay, we will roll with you, Tanya, but I'm still feeling some way about how you did my girl Belinda from last season. Okay. So then we get these two Sicilian girls who are on the street. So they're like walking, and one has like her ear things in, and one's name is Mia, and the other name is Lucia, which is a dark-haired one, right? And Lucia's like, girl, what's going on? She's like, oh, I'm still missing Massimo. She's like, girl, fuck Massimo. Let's come out. I got a plan, I got a stunt, and I need you with. Already liking these two hoes because A, I can appreciate a good sex worker, and as you know from Handmaid's Tale, I appreciate a bitch with a plan, okay? And Lucia is a bitch with a plan. So they all go, and they go, and so then they ready to leave. Now, Valentina is getting everybody information, ready for the boats to arrive. Rocco being lazy and useless. Like, I just so empathize because I'll be laying Rocco out like every time. She's like, okay, we're here. Greet them all at the same time. Bop, bop, boop. And then she's like, why the fuck you got 2 champagne glasses and there's 10 motherfucking people there in a small ass tray? What the fuck you think this is? And Rocco's like, and she was just like, not today, but I'm gonna remember. So anyway, Valentina is getting everybody information, and we get our first set. And so Lucia and Mia are out there scoping in the arrivals, okay? And I was like, ugh, what's this? Lucia's like, yeah, some American texted me, he messaged me, he said he's coming, he's staying at the White Lotus, Sicily. So Lucia has, you know, already got her dick planned, and Mia's just along for the ride like the Moby friend, okay? But she's like, who is who? You know, who could it be? Whatever. She's like, look, this pussy ain't gonna be great for however long it is, so I'm trying to put in as many miles while it's still good. And Mia's also mopey, I guess, because of Massimo, right? So then finally, so the first to arrive is Dom, which is Michael Priori, No, and then Albie. And then Valentina's like, welcome. I'm so surprised you made it because, you know, Los Angeles so far and you're so old. And I was like, ooh, Valentina, girl, work. You know, like, you got the management part right, but the customer service thing isn't quite there yet. I see what you're aiming for, but Valentina does need some polishing on her customer service, okay? So then the Spillers and the Sullivans come out, they get their champagnes, and they want to do like a little toast, like, yay, we made it. And Harper, Aubrey Plaza, is like, no thanks, I haven't eaten yet. And Ethan, the husband's like, girl, just pick up a fucking glass and just fake it, shit. Like, and she's just, you can tell she's already not feeling this trip or whatever. So she grabs it, yay, she does her toast. And Valentina's like, what the fuck, you don't like Prosecco? She's like, oh, no, it was fine. So already Harper is like that horrible person who you don't want to travel with, who always has to make everything exceptionally difficult just for the sake of being difficult. But we kind of see that Harper may have her reasons for why she is being difficult. Okay, so then we get to, to Tanya doing the most with her baggage, figuratively and literally getting out with all the bags. Even though whores on the street were like, Lucia was like, damn, is she like moving to Italy? Because Tanya has like 8 sets of bags or whatever. Now, Tanya now has someone with her, which I thought, oh, well, maybe this is like her daughter or something like that. So we'll find out, child, it's her assistant. What the fuck Tanya needs an assistant for? So Tanya and her assistant, they come off and they have all the bags. And I was like, okay. So Tanya's like, oh, I'm so good. And we get our first issue of subtext. So subtext is when the actor delivers a line that is not really about exactly what she's saying. So Tanya says, when I stay at the White Lotus, I always have a memorable time, right? So it's not because Tanya, and so that's the subtext really much alluding to the previous season for all the shenanigans that happened and the dead man and the dead shenanigans. I won't give away any spoilers if you didn't watch second season and you're not finished yet. But of all the shenanigans that happened at the White Lotus, they were staying at the last time. I think it was in Hawaii. Yeah, the White Lotus in Hawaii. So anyway, so that's our first kind of use of subtext, which was really interesting. And we're like, yeah, girl, we know it's about to be a something. So it kind of gets us for the ride. Like, we're like, okay, we know this is going to be a fun trip. We know someone's going to die. And I always say, it's not about the plot points being predictable. It's about the journey, right? So it's about kind of how we get from point A to point B. We get our guests, we get our cast of characters, we know there's a murder. So it's really about how do we how does the story unfold, right? Is it going to be predictable? Is it going to be some twists and turns? Are there going to be some memorable characters along the way? I think that's what makes a great show, is really keeping us engaged, because we know kind of where the end plot points or end points are going to be, but it's really the journey. Such an analogy is with life. So anyway, Tanya was like, so then Valentina tells Tanya, oh, your husband's already there, whatever. So now we know that Tanya has married old boy from last season. They didn't really say his name. I'll look it up. So next week, I'll be able to say his name, but we'll keep calling him Tanya's husband / asshole, which we'll get to. So Tanya's husband is already there. And she's like, yeah, I've been texting him. He's not been texting me back. At first I was like, girl, that's because you're the most, and he's in Sicily, and he's not really trying to go through all your bullshit. But that we'll talk about later. So now we get to the White Lotus in Sicily, beautiful property, and it used to be a former convent. And so the Spillers notice that there are all these decorative heads that are like placed within the room. So this is called a charged item, right? So in a movie or television show, with the director via the camera lingers on an item for a long time, and there's some kind of exposition around the item, we know that the item is either symbolically or actually crucial to the development of the plot. So if you think about Citizen Kane and Rosebud, the sled, or you think of Titanic and the necklace, right? These are all symbolic charged items that as a story unfolds, we see their importance or their symbolic meaning. And we get the story about how there once was a Moor who came over to Sicily. So Moors were really those countries in northern Africa, because Sicily is located in the Ionic Sea, and we have the northern African countries. So there's always fights, as you remember, in the 1400s and 1500s between the Moors and Spain going up into Europe and that part. So there was a Moor, parentheses, someone from northern Africa, who seduced a Sicilian girl, but he was really married, and she got mad and she cut off his head. Very importantly, I thought was a very interesting story for later on. So anyway, so then Mrs. Sullivan says, well, what's the moral of the story? Ethan, and Cameron's like, don't fuck my wife if you come in my room. And then Mrs. Sullivan says, no, maybe it's if you fuck around, you may end up dead. So we get all these little kind of tidbits of like, who could have killed who could have what. And this show is one of those stories where you really have to pay attention for every little detail, because you can maybe see what could have possibly happened or whatever, but the show is so good that you're not going to be able to figure it out from the first episode. But it's interesting kind of thinking about the theories about who could have done who and who could have done whatever. So Rocco was like showing the room to the Sullivans and the Spillers, and since they came together in their group, they have adjoining rooms. So at first you're like, oh, he's like, oh, here's the door opens. And I'm thinking, is he trying to like intimate like they may want to have a threesome or something? And you figure out that they're friends, they came together. And Harper immediately shuts that down. I was like, nah, that's okay. And then everyone just kind of looks like, damn, girl, why the fuck you so fucking rude? And so then she's like, oh, okay, well, I don't know, maybe, right? So anyway, she's just like straight awkward. And I was just like, and as a recovering attorney, I totally understand. Like, attorneys have some of them have a very awkward social setting kind of thing where they just can't really be comfortable in their skin with other people without analyzing and being too much in their head. So she really does a really great job as that. But I think also she's just a super judgmental bitch. So, that could be that too. So anyway, we get back to Nono, Dom, and Albie. And Nono is straight flirting with Isabella, the little hotel attendant. And Dom is like, oh my God, Dad, leave her alone. But we find out that the reason that they're here is because they were here to visit Nono's grandmother's village, right? So that's why they're in Sicily. So we kind of get the backstory on that. And then, Dom is already frustrated. They leave Nono. He ghosts Albie. And then Albie's kind of like, oh, what do I want to do? So one of the things from last season I'm seeing here is there's always some kind of weirdly, socially awkward, incelish young white man, right? So last season we had, Connie Britton's son who was all into like surfing. It was, watching TV, was like very socially disconnected. And now we have Albie. So I hope they're not redoing that, but there always is some kind of young white man who can't find his way or doesn't know who he is, identity issue-ish. Okay. I'll go for the ride. We'll see how interesting Albie's going to be. But, you know, he doesn't seem that interesting now. So Tanya finds her husband, finally, since she's salty because he's not texting. He's like, yeah. So all of a sudden we see the assistant, Portia, is behind her. And the husband's like, I told you don't bring her. Don't you bring her. Send her away, whatever. Tanya's like, fuck. So she goes and tells the assistant, get lost. You know, just stay in your room. Don't come in. First of all, you're ridiculous, Tanya. This is, again, the same kind of bullshit shenanigans we saw with Tanya that she used to put her girl Belinda through. So the assistant's like, what? Okay, whatever. And it just kind of seems that she's so willing to do this for her husband, who's like, you know what, this is supposed to be a romantic trip. You know, why do you have your assistant here? I told you no. Which, yeah, Tanya, why'd you bring him? But I think Tanya needs a security blanket. That she, you know, there's a level of like, not non-worthiness, but not feeling so self-assured, right? So her assistant is really her security blanket. So she's like, no, but stay close. I may need you. So assistant is like, oh my God, what the fuck? I guess I got to stay in my room. Now the Spillers are unpacking, and Aubrey Plaza is like, you know what? I'm suspicious. What, all of a sudden you sell your company and now you're constantly best friends? And her husband's like, no, he's a nice guy. We were roommates in college. We became friends, and I like him because he's consistent. And there's something to be said about people in your life, for better or for worse, who are consistent. As a general rule, I don't fuck with inconsistent people, right? So people who I always have a saying that unless I'm fucking you, you should be the same way I left you, because I wasn't in the bed with you for the change, right? So people who are inconsistent typically are, you know, it's a control mechanism, but that's a whole other video for a whole other story. But Ethan is like, Cameron is fairly consistent, right? Like, he's a consistent person. So Aubrey is just like, I think he wants something. So we definitely see a tinge of her just being judgmental. And also she's kind of a classist, right? Because she mentions about how Cameron brags about taking a helicopter to the Hamptons. If he could do it, he could do it, right? So we get this kind of like, you know, she's kind of a classist, very judgmental. And her husband's like, will you just make an effort? I don't want this to be awkward, right? So back on the hoes outside, the hoes are outside because, you know, Lucia got like, she's like, look, I got tricks to turn. This pussy ain't gonna stay dry. You're gonna stay wet forever. I got bills to pay. Let's get up in the hotel and do what we need to do. So they sneak in, and immediately Valentina is like, nope, go, get out, get out. And they're like, what? She's like, I know what you're here to do. You know, and they're like, at least I don't have to, you know, have to pay people have money. And then Valentina and Lucia are going to go back. And she's like, get them out. And then lays out the staff. Was like, who the fuck is looking at managing the door that these two hoes can just sneak on in? Loving it. Loving it. Love Valentina. Love a hoe with a plan. Anyway, Dom goes and calls his wife. So he's like, hey, I'm coming to see how you're doing. I know we had planned to be here. And me and the wife is like, why the fuck you calling me? He's like, but, you know, I wanted you to know how things are going. She's like, why the fuck are you calling me? And he's like, well, our daughter's not talking to me. She's like, yeah, because you're an asshole. So we get so there is the implication, right, that Dom has done something to make his wife estranged from him, and also the fact of why his daughter's not speaking to him. And we get also the wife references secrets. So as Dom is trying to pretend like whatever happened before he got to Sicily did not happen, the wife is not having it. She is done. She is screaming at him. She is like, I'm done with you. Don't call me. You wasted 10 years of my life. I'm done with your secrets. Goodbye. And I was like, okay, classic fuckboy move, right? Like, that's such a fuckboy type of thing to do. Like, you know you done fucked up, but now you're going to pretend like everything's okay, even though you know it's not okay. I was like, okay, Dom. But now I'm curious, like what did Dom do? Who did he do it with? You know, so, you know, I was like intrigued. Okay. So Albie goes to swim with Portia, who's sitting outside in Sicily at a 5-star resort, crying to her friend on the phone, I'm sure in the United States. I was like, you a dumb bitch. I was like, first of all, I would text Tanya with like, I need $2,000 and you won't see me at all for the whole week, okay? Like, if you can't afford to be out in Sicily and enjoy yourself, at least you should have got you some money, right? I bet you those two hookers in the street would have figured a way out to try to have some fun. So I'm just not really feeling bad for Portia sitting here crying that all she has to do is eat pasta at this 5-star resort. I mean, she could go out, she could explore. It's Sicily, right? So why is she really out here like crying out, you know? It's that whole like, millennials, I'm not millennial, but like Gen Z, like you don't know how to fucking make lemons out of lemonade, bitch. Like I was like, okay, Portia girl, whatever. So anyway, Albie comes back from his swim. He sees her crying, you know. I was like, okay, maybe this connection. I was like, you really gonna come to Sizzly and then try to fuck a chick from the United States? I was like, that's literally bringing a sandwich or bringing a sandwich to a beach. But whatever, Albie, we'll see. So then Nono comes downstairs. You know, he's high-key flirting, and Nono slips and falls. And so then all of a sudden she's like, oh, your grandfather fell, and when he has to go and take Nono back upstairs. So Tanya's back in her room, ready to get it in. I guess kind of like, you know, makeup. I brought the assistant. Let me give you some wah, 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 so you don't have to be really upset. So then she comes out, you know, with her little slinky walk and yum, yum, yum. And then the husband's like reading, and he's like, and I was like, okay, you are all trying to be romantic, and she's like sits on the bed and puts his foot on her tit, and she's just, you know, she's like, let's get it on, right? He's like, now? She's like, yeah, now. So then, you know, she's thinking she's about to get her back blown out, and then he's like, I gotta go wash up, I got swamp crotch. I was like, but you were just complaining about how she wasn't being romantic. This is all about romantic trip. She's gonna be okay with your swamp crotch. But dumbass Tanya's like, he's always thinking of me. I was like, girl, this is a red flag. This is a red flag. This is a red flag. So anyway, the Sullivan and Spillers are out having this very awkward patio conversation. Like the type of conversation you have with people, you're trying to get to know them, but you heard some things about them. So one of the sentences I always hate when I meet people is, oh, I met someone such and such, and they told me this about you, right? Like, don't bring me other people's fucking newsreels. Like, make your own determinations about myself. So Harper really ain't with the fucks with this whole thing, and she's like, oh, man, just returned from law school. She's like, yeah, tell him I said hi, and tell him, you know, congratulations on not being disbarred. I'm like, girl, just make an effort, right? So then they're literally what we see is that, you know, the Spillers are these socially conscious, voting, you know, leftists, and then the Sullivans are these kind of bourgeoisie, aristocratic, in a bubble, kind of capitalists or whatever. So these are called foils, right? Foils are when you have a character, or in this case, two sets of characters that are really diametrically opposed to each other, and they use the differences between the characters to show the space in between, or do two different journeys, right? So I guess for the moment, right, because we don't know how things are going to develop, you know, 6-7 episodes later, they're setting up them to be foils. Now, it may seem to be that maybe the Spillers and the Sullivans are a lot more alike than they are really willing to let on, but they're kind of showing kind of like there's like this really great difference, and they're, you know, super judgy. Oh, you don't watch the news, and Mrs. Sullivan possibly didn't vote. And I was just like, whatever. But we do get this interesting thing where they're talking about shows they watch. You know, like, shows are always like low-hanging fruit with talking about people who you don't like, because you go to the go-tos. Oh, you know, I like this show, I watch this show. And then they go to the classic show that I guess all white people love is Ted Lasso. I've never watched Ted Lasso, but I guess everyone's liked it, even the Emmys, because it was won like 10 zillion Emmys or whatever. But like, oh, we love Ted Lasso. Here comes Harper. I don't watch Ted Lasso. I'm like, girl, you could have faked it and nodded while everybody else was saying they like Ted Lasso. Like, really? Like, at this point, I feel like she's just in it now just for the shits and giggles, right? She's no longer like whatever her objections were, and as reasonably based as they were. Now Harper's in it just to be difficult, because I'd have been like, girl, you could have faked that Ted Lasso. Like, that was like easy hanging fruit. So then Mrs. Sullivan says how she likes watching Dateline, about how like the wives always kill husbands on vacation, and they take the oxygen tank out. I'm like, ooh, is that what happened to the man? Like, was that her husband? Because we don't know who the we that she referred to the women was. We think it's her husband. She could name it a whole new dude and just call it a we. So we don't know. So right now, Mrs. Sullivan is like possibly, I'm thinking she's the killer, right? So I'm thinking Mrs. Sullivan has already killed someone. Is going to be the person that she's killed. So, but we'll see. So then, of course, the Spillers watch documentaries, which is like total virtue signaling or whatever. And like, I kind of get the idea that like Thea was kind of like low-key hate flirting with like Harper. And I was just like, okay, are they trying to throw us off to think that like Harper like is pretending like she really hates Cameron, and then they're really having an affair? So I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. Now we get to Tanya. Child, Tanya is hunching, and her husband is like putting in all this work for such a menial response from Tanya, who then face starts to like get all scrunched up, and then she's like pushes him off. And he's like, what the fuck? And she's like, I was totally disassociating. I saw all these men's faces and effeminate hairstyles. And then it was you, and your eyes were like a shark, and they were totally dead. And he's like, you made me pull out for this shit? Like, and he's like, okay, well, I didn't finish, right? And so she's like, I need a break. Now, in the real world, you got to take one for the team and finish him up, or at least still stay present for the finishing off process, right? Like, really, Tanya? I was like, okay. So right as I'm about to get mad, at Tanya and feel bad for the husband, his trash ass starts to fat shame her about eating fucking macaroons on vacation. And he's like, how you expect to lose weight if you're eating all the macaroons? She's like, well, there is only 3. And he's like, no, there was 5. The fuck does it matter how many macaroons she ate, right? Like, so I'm like, how is this the same guy that we met in season 1, right? Because you remember in season 1, he was flirty, he was charming, and he was doing all of this. And now, because we don't know how much time has passed between the first season and the second season, but it can't really be that much because they haven't aged that much. And I was like, wow, this is such a statement of life. Motherfuckers will chase you down and then just disappoint you later on. I was like, really, dude? Like, you're getting a trash ass award so far, so early, because if she want to have some macaroons, let her eat some fucking macaroons, right? Now, Harper and Cameron go back in the room because Cameron wants to get a bathing suit from Ethan and Harper needs some sunblock, okay? So she comes in the room, gives him the, swim trunks or whatever. She's in the bathroom looking for the sunblock. So what's great about this scene is the way the director sets it up is we have the main mirror, then we have the small mirror, right? So as soon as you see mirrors, you know something's going to happen in the mirror. Otherwise, the mirror wouldn't be in the shot, right? So then we see he comes and her back is to him and he changes. And I was like, oh my God, Theo James is packing that. And we don't know it's prosthetics. We'll assume it's his. I always like to give the benefit of the doubt. So we see like him a little like, woo, and I was like, I mean, he never was really like my type, but I was like, size queen and all. And I was like, okay, but Aubrey is clearly upset about this changing with her back with the mirror shown type of situation. Now, is that really inappropriate though, right? So since she's in the bathroom, he could change anywhere in the room, right? So just because her back was turned, it wasn't like he was doing it in front with her facing, right? So I don't know, like drop down in the comments, like I could see either way, right? I could see either way, but we will all agree that Aubrey did the right thing, right? By telling her husband regardless, but was that really a something or was it not really a something? But I don't know. I mean, clearly I have hoish tendencies sometimes, so that possibly I could see how you could do that with the mirror, knowing the mirror is there, try to give someone a little sneak peek or whatever, but I don't have sex with married people, so again, that would have been out of bounds, but people nowadays, whatever. So anyway, so Albie is back. He's worried about Nono because Nono may have a concussion. And Dom is like, oh, perfect. He can go fuck with you. He can go sleep with you. Because Dom is like not really fucking with Nono. So the hoes are back outside. They're trying to sneak back in. Finally, they get a break. And then, they finally get there and they sneak back in the hotel. Now we get to the dinner scene, which is kind of where everything kind of comes together. Kind of like probably about act 4 or so in the show. And the hoes are getting their whole uniforms on. Like Lucia has her little red dress, her little peekaboo in the thing, and she's doing Mia's makeup. And then Mia turns around and is like, oh my God, I look like a whore. And she's upset. I'm like, cause your friend's a whore. You're doing hoish things like dogs laying with fleas. Like how are you surprised you look like a hoe? But I don't know. Mia just may be that trying to be naivete, or she just may be delusional. Cause I was like, you friends with a hoe, you're doing hoish shit. Like, why are you surprised, like, by when people think you're a hoe? Kind of like with the whole scene with the piano man, like we'll talk about in a second. Like, how is this situation surprising? Anyway, Nono is flirting with the waitress, and Dom is annoyed, right? So we found out that Dom is a bigwig in Hollywood, and Dom tries to reel Nono in, and Nono was like, I'm living my best life here. Like, I still get hard erections, I masturbate every day because the doctor says you got to get it out, and they're all disgusted by that. And he's like, because the women I like just keep get younger and younger. And then the dad's like, then Dom is like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And the dad, and Nono goes, well, you can relate to that. So we're like, ooh. So again, we kind of put the pieces together that Dom has broken up his marriage by fucking a younger woman, okay? In the meantime, we're thinking, who are these hoes here for? Who has contacted these hoes? So that, because when they come into the dining room, Cameron and Dom both notice the hookers, okay? So, by the way, favorite line for the whole scene, for the whole discussion was, it's a penis, it's not a sunset, right? Because Albie is all disgusted about looking at old men's junk, and he's like, it's a penis, it's not a sunset. Even though there's some penises that are more beautiful than sunsets, but that's a different discussion. But anyway, and plus I was high-key triggered that Albie thought that people after 50 shouldn't be having sex, and I'm like, okay, I'm 46, like, I got like, what, 4 more years on this? Anyway, so Cam and Dom notice the hookers. So we're still trying to figure out who called the hookers. So we don't know who called the hookers or who the hookers, who was communicating with Lucia via the internet. Because she says she has an internet connect, but we don't know who that is, okay? So then Cam also says that Ethan was like the original incel. He didn't really get a whole lot of action in college. And we kind of get to see kind of that relationship, that kind of like shy one, and then Cameron is like the kind of outgoing wild friend. So we kind of get a taste of what their dynamic was in the past. Then we get this really interesting kind of discussion about the whitefish, where Harper's like, I want to get this salad. And Ethan's like, well, I kind of want the whitefish. She's like, oh, it's going to be too fishy. I was like, why is this discussion? You get your salads, he gets the whitefish, and that's totally fine. And then the Sullivans, okay, Cameron and his wife are like, here she go again, always trying to be the boss of everybody. And then Harper peeps and is like, okay, I'll get the whitefish, but I don't want to be fishy. Like, I'm like, girl, why are you, like, it seems like everything has to be contentious, which is a very lawyer-esque quality of every issue has to be in contention, right? So if there's something open, we have to make sure it can't be an open issue. It must be a resolved issue. And I was just like getting kind of slightly triggered, because that's a very like kind of lawyery kind of tendency to have. So anyway, the piano player is playing. He's giving Mia the eyes. Albie and Portia wave because Portia's being sad. Tanya's trying to have her food and meal, but she's like looking at Portia like, girl, you need to get out of here. And then Albie's worried that Nono has a concussion, right? So, in classic hoe form, Lucia, I'm gonna get this right eventually, Lucia tells Mia she gotta go. And it totally reminded me of like, when you like take your female friend to like a gay bar, and it's all fun and games till you decide to find your dick connection, and you're like, okay, girl, I gotta see you, bye. So she totally gave Mia like, okay, girl, I got some business to take up, bye. So Mia's still there, and then Valentina catches Lucia on her way in the hallway, and then Lucia disappears. She's like, oh my God, this slut. And I was just like, girl, you could totally tell these are like low-class hookers, because like any good hooker just would have slipped Valentina some money and been like, girl, we want to do our due, we'll be nice and discreet, and they go about our way. Like most high-class hookers in hotels, they grease the palms of whoever they need to be greased to so they can operate, right? But Lucia said, I ain't got money to waste like that, and I got time to tell. So anyway, sad dumb Portia is in her room eating pasta, cyber stalking Albie. And I was like, girl, it's nighttime in Sicily. Why aren't you at a bar? Why aren't you at a club? You could be having fun. You ain't gotta stay up in your room. She says she just don't wanna see you, right? So all you gotta do is manage a schedule, be like, hey girl, let me know the times at which you're gonna be out in a hotel, and I will be outside doing something else. When I will come back to hotel, I will text you. Like, this ain't really hard to figure out. So Portia has really made this to be something way more than it really needs to be, just because she feels entitled to be able to do whatever she wants to do, when you could be making a whole ass lemonade, lemon meringue pie, lemon bars, and limoncello from the bag of lemons that Tanya's selfish ass fucking gave you. I don't understand why this is difficult. So finally we see Lucia meets her John. So we're like, ooh, who is it? Child, is Dom. I was like, okay, we kind of figured that out. So we know, so Dom and Lucia is there. And then Mia's downstairs with the piano performer, and she's like, wants to be performer. She's like so enthralled by him. Oh my God, this is so great. And then he's like, so how much? She's like, no, I'm not into that. He's like, no, really, like how much I need to get from the bank? And then she throws a drink in his face. And I was like, let's do the math. You look like a hoe, you run with hoes. Why are you surprised that he thinks you a hoe? I'm not saying, now if he had kind of forced himself on her, clearly not acceptable, right? But you cannot be upset if someone thinks you a hoe if you do hoish things, move like a hoe, and dress like a hoe. Like, I mean, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it could be a goose, it could be a platypus, but you can't be mad at people thinking that you a goose and you're really a platypus if you kind of look duckish, right? That's all I'm saying. So the Sullivans are in their room, and Mrs. Sullivan wants to FaceTime, the kids. She kind of lets her know that she has like no life at all besides raising her children because she's in Sicily, wants to FaceTime her kids again. And the husband's like, no, babe, no, it's fine. So they really start playing, about to get it in. And Aubrey and Ethan are like right behind them in the other room, judging and hating. And I'm like, why are you not fucking your husband or doing these things too? So again, we get a very much stark contrast between the two couples, right? And they go into the judging of how they don't read and how they, all the virtue signals, all the virtue signaling that, that Aubrey used to place herself above the seemingly high pedestal that she's on above the Sullivans, right? But she does tell her husband about what happened in the room. And she just kind of mentioned it and whatever. And she rolls over to go to sleep. And Ethan is feeling some sort of way, right? Which lets us know that either A, Cameron has done this before, or B, he just finds it disrespectful out of the gate, right? Just out of pocket, which some husbands may do. Like, I personally wouldn't have a problem with that unless I knew the person had hoish, trickery, trifling ways. Like, I know if I knew that that's the way that person uses to kind of go about and pick up their things, I would have felt some sort of way. But if it was some kind of innocuous, oh, he changed in front of me, I saw his butt, his dick slipped out, and that person does not have a history of doing trifling ass things, I wouldn't have thought of it. But I think that Cameron has a history of doing those type of things to the women that Ethan likes. So I'm sure there's going to be a story of how Cameron probably fucked up Ian's, previous love life from Cameron being one of those kind of like alpha, super competitive type of women, type of guy. So then we get another shot of Ethan looking at the head, charged item. So we're like, so it definitely, so really the statue signifies some sort of death that happens after a betrayal, right? So we don't know who is going to betray whom to end up dead, right? So that is kind of my theory, that there's going to be some sort of betrayal or some sort of revelation that's going to lead to someone's death. But we really don't know whose that is. But we'll see. I could be totally wrong, but that's a par for a ride. Now we get back to Tanya. Child, she done found the 2 macaroons. She's so excited. She goes running to tell her husband, look, I found the 2 macaroons. He's in the bathroom whispering. So I always watch shows with subtitles. It's kind of like a screenwriting thing just so I can get the full picture of the scene. So then you see him whispering, being like, oh, I can't talk right now. I'll do it soon, whatever. And I'm like, why are you whispering? She's like, and Tanya has her ear to the door. No, girl, no, there's no ear to the door and a suite that I'm sure you're paying for with your hundreds of millions of dollars. It would have been a hard slap, who you talking to type of situation. Anyway, he's like, oh, I'm talking to Bob. She's like, oh, here's the 2 macaroons. He's like, fine. She's like, go ahead and eat them. You're so upset. He's like, girl, I just brushed my teeth. I don't want no macaroons. And she's like, oh, and he's like, look, I'm on the phone. Go away. So already, she's feeling some sort of way. And we get this really great close-up of her possibly rethinking this whole situation through her husband, right? Because she met him on vacation. We don't know how long they dated before they got married, but clearly this is not the same guy who was like charming, who was like into her. And I was like, oh, Tanya, girl. I was like, I can't even say it's karma for the way she put our girl Belinda through, because no one deserves to be treated horribly. But I was like, oh, Tanya, girl, like, is this going to be another season with you looking for love and looking for connection and looking for affection and you not finding it? Regardless, Jennifer Coolidge is just great anyway in this scene. So I'm loving me some Tanya. And I was like, since it looks like we have a bunch of whole other trifling ass people, we got hoes, we got backstabbing friends, we have everything else, I can deal with Tanya and her little whatever. Portia though, girl, I'm gonna give you 2 more episodes with this. Maybe 1.5 more episodes, or I'm gonna be done with Portia and her ridiculousness too, because you have too good of a setup for you just be crying every motherfucking episode about how Tanya's trying to put you through it. So, Lucia and Dom are in the room, and then they're trying to do some chit chat, whatever. He's like, I'm from LA. And she's like, oh my God, I love LA. I would love to go. He's like, you should do it. And she's like, oh, I can't, I don't have the money. That's a good hoe for you. So she'll put all the basics out there. I'm young, this is wet and ready, and I don't have no money. Okay, so Dom can put all of the points together and figure it out of what you got to do. And if she ends up fucking Dom and not getting any money, she should be fired for being a hoe anyway, because she'd already told him this shit ain't for free. And she'd have told Mia there's no use of having an empty purse and you got a wet puss. Okay, so I was like, okay, girl, get your money. So anyway, they get to it. Lucia gets to go into business, and and the episode's over. So this gave us a lot. But I really like White Lotus. It gives me all the things I need. It's so well written. Mike White, the creator, who also wrote this episode and directed it, did a fantastic job. And the characters all seem to be very interesting. And I'm really invested in this journey, right? I want to see kind of what goes. So this episode, I was about to call it the pilot, but it's not. So episode 1 really kind of set the high bar, right? So the question is going to be, is it going to keep us there? Or are we going to come down? And sometimes we do have like some low episode moments, but overall, A+ episode. I really like it. So drop that in the comments. Tell me who you think potentially may have died and who did it. And also, let's talk about the Cameron Dick Slip mirror situation, because I'm really interested. I'm always interested to kind of think like what other people may have thought of situations like that too. So anyway, thank you guys. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. Share this video with your friends. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.